I never thought a key could feel like betrayal. But that's exactly what I was holding, an old brass key, tucked in an envelope that arrived the same day my parents tried to erase me from my own legacy. My name's Logan. I teach high school history in Vermont, drink too much diner coffee, and used to believe family meant something unshakable. That was before my grandmother passed. Before the will. Before my name was read out loud in that lawyer's office, and the air shifted in the room like a storm rolling in. The house, a towering Victorian my grandmother had lived in since the 50s, was left to me. Not shared, not managed jointly, mine. But you wouldn't have known that by the way my mother Rebecca slid the house keys off the table, like she was just tidying up after brunch. "It's too much house for you," she said, brushing off the cracked leather strap like it was dust. "You've got enough to worry about with your little job." My father Martin nodded silently beside her, his hands folded, avoiding my eyes. Then came my sister Elena, calm and composed as always, with her perfectly neutral tone. Legally, they still have power of attorney over the estate. The sale's already been finalised. I remember laughing, not because it was funny, but because it was the only way I could stop myself from screaming. They didn't just misunderstand the will, they ignored it, they bulldozed it. And me, I hadn't even opened the envelope Grandma's lawyer gave me yet. It was labelled, "Only open after the reading of the will." That night, when the house emptied out and the silence returned, I sat in my grandmother's old reading chair and opened it. Inside, a handwritten note, a USB drive, and a key. "If you're reading this, Logan, then they did exactly what I expected. Don't worry, I planned for that. Go to the old stone wall in the east garden. Find the brick with the carved owl. There's more they don't know. And that's what will save you." I didn't sleep that night. I walked through the frost-bitten garden in the dark, flashlight in one hand, key in the other, until my fingers brushed against the smooth shape of a carved owl. The brick loosened with a quiet click. Behind it, a tin box wrapped in floral cloth. Inside, documents, a notarized codicil, a flash drive, another letter from her, one line standing out like it had been whispered directly into my bones. Truth doesn't hide, it waits. By morning, I was at Julian Hart's office, the attorney listed in Grandma's letter. His building sat quietly at the edge of downtown, an old stone place, with ivy crawling up the windows, like time forgot to keep moving. Julian was sharp in a low-key kind of way. Dark sweater, wire-rimmed glasses, and the kind of voice that doesn't need to get loud to make a point. When I handed him the codicil and the USB, he didn't say much, just opened the folder and started flipping. Less than 10 minutes in, he looked up with an expression I hadn't seen since finals week in law class. Restrained excitement mixed with legal fury. "This changes everything," he said. Turns out, Grandma had updated her will 6 months before she passed. A fully notarized amendment, airtight and clear. The house could not be sold without my written consent, verified specifically by Julian himself. I blinked, but they already signed a deal. They gave me a copy of the sale agreement with my signature. Julian nodded grimly, already flipping pages. "Let's see it." I pulled the copy from my bag. He compared it side by side with my actual ID signature from the file. "Not yours," he confirmed, and, frankly, not even close. I already knew who it was. The loopy L-armed, the way the curves like a cursive ribbon, Rebecca's handwriting. My mother, she used to sign my school permission slips the same way when I was a kid. "Can we prove it?" I asked, quieter than I meant to. Julian's eyes didn't flinch. With timestamps, witness analysis, and a forensic expert. "Absolutely." He leaned forward. "Logan, this isn't just about overriding a will anymore. This is fraud. signature forgery, and it carries serious legal consequences. I nodded slowly. I wasn't even in the state the day that contract was signed. I was in Denver, conference week. I've got hotel receipts, plane stubs, and about 10 social media check-ins. Julian cracked a rare smile. Then we've got the upper hand. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. A message from Elena. We know what you're doing. Don't burn the whole family over this. Be smart. I showed it to Julian. He read it, his face unreadable. Classic bluff. People tend to get loud when they're scared. He slid the codicil back into a protective sleeve. We'll issue a cease and desist to the buyer today. I'll also file a motion to pause all property transfers pending investigation. But you need to stay quiet. Don't tip them off. And keep everything secure, especially this folder. If they forged your signature, they'll do worse to keep this buried. I walked out of Julian's office with the first real thing I'd felt since this began: leverage. But that sense of control shattered a few hours later when I returned to the house. The locks were changed. On the door, a printed sign, taped half crooked with duct tape, no entry. Property under buyer management. I stood there staring at it, key still in my hand, jaw tight. I didn't knock, didn't call. Instead, I opened my phone, typed out one line to Julian. They locked me out. I'm not backing down, ready for the next step, because now this wasn't just about a house. This was about the message underneath the marble, buried in silence, dressed up as family business. It was about taking back what they tried to sell behind my back, with my name forged on the bill. And they were about to learn I may have been the quiet one at the table, but I wasn't sitting there anymore. When I walked back into Julian's office the next morning, the air already felt heavier, like something big was about to happen. He didn't look up right away, just gestured toward the seat across from him while scanning a document, with the kind of focus only lawyers and surgeons can manage. They moved fast, he said finally, setting the paper down. Faster than I expected. He handed me a printed notice, a scheduled property handover with the buyer, Isla Monroe. Julian sat back. She's a real estate investor out of Albany, wired a deposit, was planning to take possession in 3 days, but there's no indication she knows anything's off. I nodded slowly. So she might be another victim in this. She might. Or she might have been played, like you. Julian gave a small smirk, the kind you'd miss if you weren't watching closely. Either way, I've arranged a meeting with her. Today, 2:30. You'll be there. By the time 2:30 hit, I had reviewed every piece of evidence we had at least 5 times. The notarized codicil, the forged contract, my plane tickets to Denver, receipts from the conference, check-ins photos. Julian's assistant had laid it all out on the table like we were preparing for court, because we basically were. Isla Monroe arrived 5 minutes early, tall, confident, tan blazer. The kind of posture you don't get unless you've been underestimated by a dozen boardrooms. But her eyes? They flicked to mine like she already knew something was off. "You're Logan Carter?" she asked, offering her hand. I nodded. "The actual owner of the house you think you bought." Julian cut right to it. He slid the contract across the table, pointing to the forged signature. "Miss Monroe, this is the document you were given by Martin and Rebecca Carter. It claims Logan agreed to the sale, but this signature isn't his." She looked at it, expression unreadable. "That's not your handwriting?" "No," I said flatly. "And on the day this was signed, I was across the country. I have proof." Isla leaned back in her chair, lips tightening slightly. "So you're saying they forged your name?" Julian answered before I could. "They didn't just forge it, they violated a legal codicil to the will. This sale isn't just invalid, it's criminal." For a long moment, Isla said nothing, just stared at the paper like it had started burning in her hands. Then she set it down slowly. They told me you were too overwhelmed to deal with the property, she said, that you asked them to handle it discreetly. They made it seem like they were doing you a favor. I almost laughed. They told me the house was too much for me, that I should let it go for my own good. I didn't think they meant literally. She shook her head, clearly angry now, but not at me. I don't like being lied to, especially when I've wired 6 figures for something that legally never should have been on the market. Julian nodded. We'll be filing a formal complaint, but your cooperation could help expedite that. Any emails, texts, voicemails, anything they sent you could support our case. Isla didn't hesitate. You'll have them by tomorrow. I don't want any part of this if it's dirty, and it sounds filthy. She stood, brushed off her coat, and looked me in the eye. I'm sorry. For what it's worth, I really am. I appreciate that, I said quietly. She hesitated at the door. Rebecca kept pushing me to sign quickly, said if I didn't, she had other offers. There was a desperation in her voice. I just thought it was urgency. But now? She shook her head. It was fear, panic, like she was trying to outrun something. I didn't reply, but I was already thinking the same thing. That night I got a text I never expected from Caleb, my younger brother, the one who always mirrored my parents, who used to say things like, "You just don't get how hard they work, Logan. Can we meet? It's important." I didn't respond immediately, just stared at the screen until the words blurred. But then I typed, "Where?" We met at a diner off the main road, the kind of place where the tables wobble and the coffee always tastes burnt. He was already there, tapping his fingers on the napkin holder. When I walked in, he stood, not something Caleb usually did. He looked different, less sure, less smug, more like the kid who used to beg me to sneak him into PG-13 movies. "I'm not proud of what I did," he said, skipping the small talk. "But I need to tell you something before it's too late." I stayed silent. "They forged your signature," he continued. "It wasn't just Mum. Eleanor helped. And Dad knew. They said it was the only way to fix the mess." "What mess?" he swallowed. "Dad's company, its bleeding money, bad loans, silent partners threatening lawsuits. Mum figured if they could offload the house fast, they could float the business another quarter. She called it a temporary fix. I leaned back. So I was the fix. He didn't respond, which was response enough. "There's more," he said. "They're planning a second sale, Friday night. Regency Hotel, room 746. New buyer. High-value assets included." I blinked. "What kind of assets?" He looked down. "Stuff Grandma hid. Art, jewellery, maybe antiques. I don't know exactly, but Mom said if they bundled it into a private deal, they could make double." For a second, I didn't say anything. Just felt the blood drain from my face. Then I pulled out my phone and texted Julian, "Secret meeting. Friday, room 746, Regency Hotel. Bring gear." I looked back up at Caleb. "Will you testify if this goes to court?" He didn't answer right away. "Then, yeah, I'll do it." "Why now?" He hesitated, then said almost too softly, "Because she trusted you." "Not them. And maybe." She was right. I nodded once. Not in forgiveness, not yet, but maybe in recognition. Because this was no longer just a betrayal. This was a conspiracy. And I wasn't walking away. I was walking in, this time with the truth, a lawyer, and a recorder in my pocket. By the time Friday night came, I wasn't nervous. I was focused. Tired, yes. Hollowed out in a way you can't explain unless your own parents have tried to erase you on legal paper. But nervous? No. Julian and I checked into room 745 at the Regency Hotel 2 hours early. Not because we were paranoid, though maybe we were, but because we needed every detail in place. Across the thin drywall, room 746, where my family would try to make their second secret sale. Julian unpacked the recording gear like it was second nature. He'd done this before. I hadn't asked when, and he hadn't offered. A small audio device slipped neatly into the outlet between our rooms, calibrated for thin walls, low frequencies, and, apparently, whispers fueled by desperation. By 8:02 p.m., voices came through. I didn't expect to hear Elena first. Her voice always carried that crisp perfection, the kind you'd hear in a press release, not a living room. But tonight, it cracked slightly. We only have tonight. If the audit starts Monday and the money's not in by then, they'll tear us apart. Then my father, it's already in motion. The buyer just wants confirmation on the items. That's all. Silence. Then my mother, Rebecca, sharp and practiced, like always. Logan doesn't know the full extent. As long as we keep the sale private, we can push it through before he makes any more noise. My fists clenched. Julian gave me a slight shake of the head. Stay calm. The next few minutes were a blur of details I never wanted to know. How they'd bundled my grandmother's hidden possessions into a hush-hush transfer. How they'd staged false documentation to list them as family heirlooms, not part of the estate. How they'd planned to siphon the money through shell accounts just until things stabilize. Then the buyer spoke. Male, Midwestern accent, cautious but greedy. If those are what you say they are, originals, pre-war, not documented, then they're worth millions. But I won't touch them unless I know for sure. My mother replied, they're still in the house, behind the panelling in the library wall. She kept them hidden for decades. She thought no one knew. The bile rose in my throat. My grandmother, who spent her final years sipping tea in that same library, telling me about art and light and history, had hidden the collection not because she didn't trust the world, but because she didn't trust them. And she was right, Rebecca went on. Tomorrow morning, we retrieve them before Logan gets wind of anything. We say it's for sentimental retrieval before closing. He won't be there. Julian tapped his watch. We had more than enough. He disconnected the recording, sealed it in a hard drive, and gave me a look that said it all. This wasn't just criminal. It was personal. We slipped out through the side entrance. I didn't look back. By Saturday morning, we had a court-issued property protection order and an authorized warrant to freeze all activity on the estate grounds. No one could enter, remove, or even touch anything without my written consent. And so, when I pulled up to the house that morning, I wasn't surprised to find Elena at the front door, fumbling with a set of keys. "What are you doing here?" I asked, stepping out of the car. She spun around, startled, caught. Mum asked me to check something in the library. I stared at her. The same library where the hidden art is stored. Her eyes widened. For a second, just one, the real Elena cracked through, the one underneath the perfect wardrobe and icy tone. "You listened in?" "No," I said, stepping past her. "I recorded a confession." Julian joined me, handing her the protection order. From this point forward, Logan is the sole authorized party allowed inside. Any interference is obstruction. Elena didn't argue. She just handed me the keys and left. No dramatic speech, no begging, just a quiet retreat. Inside, the air felt heavier than usual, like the walls were holding their breath. Julian and I walked directly to the library, our footsteps echoing on the old hardwood. My grandmother's portrait still hung over the fireplace, her face soft, knowing. I felt her presence in that room, not as memory, but as will, as defiance. Behind the third bookshelf, just like Rebecca said, there was a panel. Julian found the latch. It clicked with a softness that made my spine tighten. Inside, 4 sealed art tubes, a carved wooden box, and a thick envelope with a red wax seal. I opened the envelope with shaking fingers. Inside was a single sheet, written in my grandmother's hand. "It's not the artwork that matters. It's the truth it reveals. Protect it. Let no one rewrite what I preserved." I couldn't speak. Julian placed a gentle hand on my shoulder, then turned to examine the contents. "These are real," he said. "And if I'm right, they're very old." I looked up. "How old?" He opened the box, revealing 2 more envelopes and a hand-drawn inventory list dated 1942 names, written in French. One artist's name stood out. I recognized it from a high school art history lesson. A Jewish painter whose work vanished during the Nazi occupation. "Some of these were reported missing," Julian said. "If they match, this isn't just fraud or theft." He looked at me carefully. "This could be international art trafficking." We drove straight to the authorities. Julian handed over the audio recording, the forged signature contract, the original will, and the collection records. I gave my statement. Caleb gave his. Isla submitted every message she had from my mother and father. The lead investigator, a man named Gregory Hale, reviewed the file quietly. When he finished, he set it down and said one sentence that felt like thunder: "There's enough here to open a criminal investigation." That night, they issued a warrant for seizure of all hidden assets. And Sunday evening, we followed them to the Arlington Hotel. Room 1403. Rebecca was already inside, carefully unwrapping a framed canvas. The collector froze when he saw us. My mother turned, and for the first time in my life, she looked afraid. "What is this?" she demanded. "This," I said, lifting my phone, "is the truth. And this time, it's not staying buried." The moment I stepped into room 1403 of the Arlington Hotel, everything slowed. My mother froze mid-motion, a wrapped painting in her hand. My father stood behind her, looking less like a man in charge and more like a man freshly gutted. The buyer, whoever he was, took one look at my face, and then the badge flashed by Detective Hale, and stepped away from the canvas like it had turned radioactive. Rebecca recovered first. "What is this?" she asked, voice cool but cracking at the edges. I lifted my phone. "This is a recording device. And this time, it's staying on." She opened her mouth, but Julian stepped in beside me, handing over the warrant and inventory documentation to Hale. "Those paintings," he said, "match multiple listings from the National Art Crime Database. Missing since 1943, illegally acquired, undocumented, and part of an estate never authorized for transfer." The buyer, now visibly pale, backed away, hands up. "I didn't know," he said. "They told me it was part of a family collection. Unclaimed assets." "That's what they told me too," I said flatly. Turns out we were both just props. My father tried to speak next. "Logan, your mother didn't." "Don't," I interrupted. "You made this choice, all of you." Detective Hale began reading rights, sealing up artwork, photographing evidence, cataloguing digital devices and handwritten notes. Caleb stood in the corner, clutching the documents he'd retrieved from our parents' office, bank records, off-book transactions, shell accounts. No one asked him to step forward. He did it on his own. And Elena? She just sat in the corner, hands in her lap, staring at the patterned carpet, like it could somehow explain what had happened to us. I stood still as the room buzzed with authority, until my mother turned and looked directly at me. Her eyes didn't plead. They judged. "Why you?" she asked softly. Why did she choose you over the rest of us? I met her gaze and gave the only honest answer I had. because I didn't see the house as something to sell. 2 months later, the headlines told most of the story. Furniture empire faces collapse amidst international art theft probe. Carter family matriarch's collection tied to lost WWII artwork. Heir uncovers forgery, fraud, and hidden millions. Rebecca and Martin Carter, my parents, were sentenced to 6 and 8 years respectively. A plea deal required full cooperation, the return of all illegally held assets, and the naming of additional silent partners. 3 more executives tied to my father's company were indicted. The company, once proudly stamped Carter and Company, was dissolved. What wasn't returned to creditors and federal agencies was transferred to the estate of Evelyn Carter, my grandmother. And since the court had formally declared me the sole heir, every remaining asset, every preserved item, every dollar reclaimed, was mine. But I wasn't thinking about the headlines when I walked back through the front door of her house. I was thinking about the sound the porch steps made, that creak under the 3rd board, the scent of lavender she used to tie into sachets for my sock drawer, the faint outline of a crack in the ceiling above the parlour that, if you looked from the right angle, looked exactly like a heart. Vanessa, the buyer who'd become something like a friend, helped me carefully rehang the restored art pieces. Caleb sanded the kitchen threshold, where we'd all scraped our feet as kids. Elena unexpectedly sent a letter, no apology, just a line that read, "You were right about all of it. Do something better with it than we ever would have." I kept the letter, not for revenge, but because some truths need to be kept, even the hard ones. Julian dropped by one Friday afternoon, a thick folder in hand. "Final confirmation," he said, setting it on the table in what used to be my grandmother's favourite room. "The house, the recovered art, the settlement, all yours. No more disputes, no more loopholes." I flipped through the documents. Clean, stamped, sealed, official. He pulled out one last envelope, cream-coloured, slightly worn. "This came from the archives," he added. "It's dated a week before Evelyn passed." I opened it slowly. Inside, her familiar handwriting curled across 3 short lines. "If you're reading this, Logan, then the truth has come. I always believed you'd guard it. Not for legacy, but for meaning. This house isn't just where we lived. It's where the truth stayed safe, waiting for someone to listen. Let it be more than protection. Let it be peace. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. Peace doesn't always look like celebration. Sometimes it's just a deep breath in a house that finally feels like yours, because you earned it." A week later, Isla returned with something wrapped in velvet. "I believe this belonged to your grandmother," she said. It was a watercolour, soft pastels of a spring garden. I'd seen it for years above her bed. I always thought it was just a print. Turned out, it was an original. The debut work of a forgotten female artist, signed discreetly under layers of time. My grandmother had been her friend, her patron, her protector. "She was more than we knew," Isla said softly. I nodded. She always was. We hung the painting back where it belonged, above the fireplace, facing the morning light. That evening, I stood on the porch with Caleb, sipping black tea, the air filled with the scent of fresh wood and the faintest trace of lavender. "This place," he said, "feels like it's breathing again." "It was never just about the place," I replied. He nodded, quiet for a while, then added, "Thanks for not shutting me out." "I almost did," I admitted, but Evelyn would have told me to wait. She always said, "The people who truly change never beg for second chances. They just show up and do better." So that's what we're doing, not forgetting, not pretending it didn't happen, but restoring what was broken, not because it's easy, but because it's worth it. And as for the house, it's still creaky. The pipes still groan in the winter. The windows still rattle when the wind blows off the mountains, but it's no longer filled with secrets. It's filled with music and memory and second chances. It's filled with truth. And somehow, that's enough. Story 2, when I pulled up to my parents' house that morning, I expected to see balloons, luggage, chaos, typical signs of a family trip. Instead, I was greeted by silence and 5 confused little faces staring back at me from the living room window. "Hi, Aunt Kira," chirped my 6-year-old nephew. I smiled automatically, but my stomach sank. Something wasn't right. Let me rewind. My name's Kira Dalton. I'm 34, single, and a senior marketing director at a top firm in Chicago. On paper, I've made it. Nice apartment, downtown, corner office with skyline views, but underneath the resume is a history that reads more like an unpaid internship in family responsibility. I'm the oldest of 3. My sisters, Maya and Claire, are 4 and 7 years younger, respectively. Our parents worked long hours running a family-owned hardware business, and somewhere along the way, they decided that meant I should pick up the slack at home. It started with little things. "Kira, just hold the baby for a second." That second often turned into hours. I was 9 the first time I changed a diaper, 12 when I cooked my first full dinner, 14 when I missed my first school dance to babysit, 16 when I gave up a theatre audition because the house couldn't run without me. The pattern held. At 18, I skipped a spring break trip with friends after my parents dropped a last-minute bombshell. "Grandma's sick, and we have to fly out tomorrow. Can you watch the girls?" I had saved for months, ticket in hand. They didn't ask. They informed. I stayed. And they lied. They weren't with Grandma. They were at a spa retreat in Arizona. That was the first time I felt it. The burn of betrayal hidden under a thick layer of obligation. But I buried it. I paid my way through college with scholarships and 2 jobs, only to be told Maya got into Columbia. Can you help with her tuition? I was barely affording my own bills, but of course I helped. Took on a 3rd gig. Skipped meals. I was the one they could count on. I never said no. I planned both of my sisters' weddings, every flower, every table, every guest issue. When Claire had her first kid, I basically moved in on weekends. "You're so good with kids," they'd say. Which really meant, can you sacrifice your time, your sleep, and your sanity so we don't have to? I started turning into a shadow in my own life. Birthdays forgotten. Boyfriends ghosted after too many sorry. I have to babysit again, excuses. I became the fallback, the default, the safe bet, and they leaned hard into it. Fast forward to last spring. It was my mum's 60th birthday, and retirement was around the corner. Maya and Claire came to me all excited. "We're planning something huge, a surprise getaway for Mum. Adults only. Super exclusive resort. No kids allowed." Sounded great, until they asked me to chip in. When I asked how much, I nearly choked on my coffee. They were requesting an amount equivalent to 3 months of my salary. I hesitated, but old habits die hard. "Fine," I said. "I'll wire it." And then came the cherry on top. "We'll all meet at Mom's house the morning of. Don't plan anything else that week. We've got it all taken care of." So there I was, suitcase packed, waiting outside my parents' house, ready for a well-earned vacation, only to be greeted by 5 kids and a handwritten letter taped to the fridge. "Kira, we're already on the way to Serenity Cove Resort. Adults only finally, right? You're the best with the kids, and they're most comfortable with you. Fridge is stocked. Contact list is on the counter. Enjoy the week. Don't be mad. We'll take lots of pics. Love, Mom, Maya, and Claire PSALEXs. Meds are at 4 p.m. DAILI. Don't forget." I stood there, rereading that note over and over, every word a slap to the face. Not only had they left without telling me, but they used my money to fund the entire trip, then dumped their children on me like I was a paid sitter. I called. No answer. Texted. Nothing. When Maya finally picked up, she tried to laugh it off. Kira, don't be so dramatic. You're great with the kids, and you're not exactly tied down. What's the big deal? We just wanted a break. That line, "you're not tied down," hit me like a punch. Because what she meant was, you don't matter. You don't have a life. Something inside me cracked. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't even argue. I hung up, took a breath, and made 3 phone calls. First, the police. Second, Child Protective Services. Third, a babysitting agency. I wasn't doing this. Not again. By the time the officers arrived, I had already fed the kids, set up cartoons, and calmed the baby. But my heart was thudding like I'd just run a marathon. This wasn't just about this week, it was every year, every slight, every time they'd assumed I'd just handle it. An hour later, my mother burst through the front door like a tornado, flanked by Maya and Claire. "What did you do?" she cried, her voice trembling. I looked at her calmly. "I didn't agree to this. You left minors in my care without consent. I did what any responsible adult would do. I called the authorities. They were taken to the station for questioning. CPS opened an investigation. The kids were temporarily placed under my legal supervision while the case processed. I didn't argue. I didn't gloat. I just made lunch for the kids and sat with them telling stories until they napped. And when my phone lit up with panicked texts and voicemails, I didn't answer, because finally I had chosen myself. The next 48 hours were surreal. While my sisters were sipping cocktails and posting selfies from their momcation, I was explaining to a CPS caseworker why 3 kids were left alone in a house with nothing but a note and some string cheese in the fridge. I wasn't angry anymore, just done. There's a point where the well runs dry, and I had nothing left to give them, not energy, not sympathy, not excuses. Maya called again, and again. Then Claire. Then my mum. I didn't answer until CPS had everything squared away, and the agency they'd sent confirmed that a licensed sitter could take over. That's when I finally picked up. "Kira," Maya started, voice soft, like she knew she was stepping into a minefield. "We didn't mean to make you feel." "No," I cut her off, calm but firm. "You meant for me to take care of your kids." Without asking. While you spent the money I gave, thinking we were all going on a trip together. There was a pause. Then she tried it, the guilt trip. "But you're always so good with them. You know they love you. We just thought after everything you've done before." "Exactly," I said. "Everything I've done before. That's why you thought this was okay. Because I never said no." Silence. Then Claire chimed in. "You're blowing this way out of proportion. It's not like we abandoned them in the woods. They were at home. With you." I laughed. I actually laughed. "Do you even hear yourself? You left your kids with no heads up, no conversation, just a note and an assumption. That's not parenting. That's outsourcing." I hung up. That night, I sat on the couch with a glass of wine in one hand, the baby monitor in the other. The sitter was upstairs, and I could finally breathe for the first time in years. The next day, the fallout hit. My mum showed up at my place first, no call, no warning, just buzzed in like she still had that right. Her eyes were puffy. "We're being investigated, Kira. CPS might restrict Maya and Claire from seeing their kids alone. Do you have any idea what you've done to this family?" I tilted my head. "You mean by refusing to cover for your irresponsibility?" "Yeah, I do." Her voice broke. "We raised you better than this. No, I said, you raised me to be convenient. She tried to protest, but I stopped her cold. You raised me to handle everything. So you wouldn't have to. So Maya and Claire could float through life while I stayed anchored, pulling the weight. You didn't raise me to have boundaries. You raised me to say eyes while my own life passed me by. That shut her up. I told her, kindly but clearly, that I needed time, not just a few days. Real space, real distance. I was done being the emergency contact for people who never showed up for me, and I meant it. Weeks passed. The CPS investigation moved forward. Maya and Claire were hit hard. They now had supervised visitation schedules, mandatory parenting classes, and a permanent red flag on their records. Their once idyllic mum blog lives wrecked. I wasn't gloating. I was grieving. Not for them, for me. For all the birthdays spent alone. For the vacations cancelled last minute. For the relationships I'd lost because I was always on call. I realised I'd been auditioning for their love for decades. And the part? It wasn't worth it. Maya sent long apology emails. Claire sent short, defensive texts. My mum alternated between guilt-ridden silence and passive-aggressive updates. But I didn't respond, not yet. Instead, I started living a life that didn't revolve around their needs. I finally signed up for a weekend cooking class I'd cancelled 3 times before. I booked a solo trip to Italy and didn't tell a soul. I started dating someone new, a software developer named Chris, who didn't flinch when I told him my family drama was complicated. And you know what? It felt like breathing for the first time. Like I'd stepped outside after living in a house with no windows. One afternoon, about 6 months after the abandonment, I got a text from Claire. Hey, Mum said she's struggling financially. Dad lost some clients. Any way you can help with rent? I stared at it for a minute, then typed one word, number followed by another. Good luck. I didn't owe them anymore. That same week, I got a call from CPS. They asked if I was still willing to be the emergency contact for the kids if anything came up. I said yes. Not because I forgave my sisters, but because the kids didn't choose this mess. And I knew if something went down again, I'd want them safe. But I also made something else clear, only if it's temporary. I'm not their default parent. The social worker paused, then said, Good for you, Miss Dalton. Funny how 3 words good for you can feel like a hug when you've spent your life giving them and never getting one back. A year later, my life doesn't look anything like it used to. And I mean that in the best way. The biggest difference, my phone doesn't light up with emergencies anymore. No late-night texts asking if I can just swing by for a few hours. No guilt-tripped voicemails layered with passive aggression and fake affection. Just peace. Real peace. After CPS closed the case, things unraveled fast for Maya and Claire. The investigation brought heat not just legally, but publicly. Word got around. School administrators, neighbours, even friends, they all heard the story. And Maya's curated mumfluencer image? Gone. Sponsors dropped her within weeks. Claire's husband, who had always played the part of the high-functioning lawyer, wasn't thrilled when their parenting was called into question in court documents. They separated not long after. I didn't cheer. I didn't cry. I just watched it unfold. Quietly. From a distance I should have established years ago. My parents didn't fare much better. My dad's small consulting firm lost contracts after one too many whispers about that family in the news. Mom burned through her savings trying to fix things, but legal bills aren't cheap. Neither is losing control over the narrative she worked so hard to spin all those years. And me? I got promoted. Again. Turns out, when you stop bending over backwards for people who take advantage of you, you have a lot more energy for your own life. I started mentoring younger women at work, not because someone asked me to, because I wanted to. I also moved to a new apartment, smaller but warmer, with bookshelves I actually have time to fill now, with candles I light just because I can, with no toys underfoot, no baby monitors, no dried spaghetti in the sink from feeding 5 kids who weren't mine. Chris and I are still together. It's slow but steady. He knows the story. He listened, really listened without trying to fix it. And when I told him I wasn't sure I ever wanted kids, he nodded and said, "You've done more parenting than most people do in a lifetime. Whatever you want next is up to you." That was the first time anyone ever said that to me. Whatever you want next is up to you. That line stuck, because for so long my life wasn't mine. It belonged to whoever needed something. A ride, a babysitter, a favour, a check. My sisters saw me as dependable. My parents saw me as responsible. But no one saw me as a person who also had limits. Now, I live like I exist. Not in a flashy, revenge-driven, scorched earth kind of way. No viral takedowns. No family group chats exploded with dramatic exits. Just silence. Peaceful, intentional, well-earned silence. Every now and then, I get updates from a distance. A cousin sends me a screenshot of Maya's latest attempt to revive her Instagram presence. Lots of healing and growth hashtags. All surface level. Claire, I hear, is trying to co-parent more consistently, but her tone hasn't softened much. Still bitter, still blaming. And then there was the knock on my office door. Tiffany, my assistant, poked her head in. "Ah, your mum's here." I froze for a second. Not scared, not angry, just curious. "Let her in," I said. My mother looked different, smaller somehow. Not just older, tired in a way that had nothing to do with years and everything to do with weight. The emotional kind, the kind I used to carry. She sat across from me and started slow. "I wanted to thank you," she said, "for looking after the kids when you didn't have to. And to ask for help." There it was. They always came with gratitude tied to a request. I leaned back in my chair. "We're not doing well," she said. "Your father lost his biggest contract." Claire's struggling. "Maya, well, you know, and the legal stuff drained everything. I was hoping maybe you could help. Just a small loan." I didn't get angry. I didn't lecture. I just said what I should have said years ago. "No," she blinked. "But no," I repeated. "Mom, I love you. But love isn't a debit card. I've paid in full." And then some. Tears welled up in her eyes. "You've changed," I smiled. Finally, I walked her to the elevator. No hugs, just a soft goodbye. A peaceful one. She didn't scream. She didn't beg. She just left. And when the doors closed, I exhaled. That night, I lit a candle, poured a glass of wine, and sat on my balcony watching the city glow. I didn't think about my sisters. I didn't check my phone for guilt-laced messages. I didn't replay old arguments. I just sat in my own quiet, my own peace. Sometimes people say revenge is best served cold. But honestly, I didn't need revenge. I needed boundaries. And now that I've found them, I protect them like my life depends on it, because it kind of does. I used to think I was the glue that held my family together. Turns out I was just the tape they wrapped around every problem. But I'm not tape anymore. I'm not their backup plan, their free childcare, or their emotional crutch. I'm Kira. And I'm finally living a life that belongs to me. Story 3. I'm 29, married well, technically still divorce pending, but we'll get there. And until recently, I thought I was just the unlucky daughter-in-law who drew the short straw in the family hierarchy. This story is about how my in-laws went on a dream vacation and tried to dump their problems on me, only for everything to backfire in ways they never saw coming. The setup, Hawaii for them, responsibility dump for me. So, picture this. My husband, Noah, his overbearing mum, stepdad, and his younger half-sister, Lena, are all prepping for a week-long getaway to Hawaii. Lena, who's 23, has been bedridden and non-verbal since childhood due to supposed complications from a high fever when she was a kid. The family has always said it caused brain damage. Tragic, right? Anyway, just before they leave, Noah casually drops this bomb on me. Taking care of Lena is your responsibility while we're gone. Don't mess it up. Noah didn't ask. He didn't say please. Just dumped his sister on me like a sack of potatoes and headed for the airport. I should have been mad. Scratch that I was mad. But I've always liked Lena. She's sweet, expressive through sign language, and honestly the only family member who doesn't make me feel like dog poop on a Prada heel. So I sucked it up, gave them a fake smile and agreed to babysit Lena for the week. Spoiler alert, I wasn't the one getting babysat. Quick flashback. The red flags ignored when I first met Noah. He was charming, attentive, even romantic. Think late night surprise flowers and surprise pastry runs. Our relationship moved fast. Too fast. I gave up a decent job in banking to be a stay-at-home wife, thinking we'd build something beautiful together. Big mistake. About a year into our marriage, Noah stopped being charming and started being, well, a corporate ghost. Long hours, late nights, whiskey breath, and a phone he guarded like it contained state secrets. When I'd ask him what was up, he'd just say, "You're imagining things. Don't start drama." Classic gaslighting. He even started going to his parents' place alone every weekend. When I asked to tag along, he acted like I was requesting a kidney. Eventually, I pushed hard enough that he let me come with him. That's when I noticed something weird. His entire family seemed irritated that I was even there, especially his mum. She sneered at the pastries I brought and threw passive-aggressive jabs like it was an Olympic sport. The calm before the bombshell that weekend, as they packed for their trip, Noah made his little announcement that I'd be staying behind with Lena. Fine, whatever. Better than dealing with his mother in Hawaii. Once everyone left, I walked into Lena's room, expecting our usual silent sign language catch-up. But instead, she sat up, looked me dead in the eyes and spoke, "All right, Mira, let's go." I nearly dropped my overnight bag. "You talk," I choked out. She laughed. "I can walk too." Turns out Lena's condition was, how do I put this delicately, completely fabricated. At least for the last year or so, the truth unfolds. According to Lena, her stepmother Noah's mum always treated her like an unwanted stepchild. Lena's biological mum had divorced her dad early, and her stepmum, Queen Passive Aggression, never accepted her. So Lena decided to check out. If she was going to be treated like a burden, she might as well be one. Until recently, only her dad knew the truth. But now, I've had enough. So I figured, why not crash their vacation? That's right. Lena had booked us 2 tickets to Hawaii, same resort, different airline. Her dad funded the whole thing and even got me a passport behind the scenes. Y'all, I was fluid, but also, game on. Enter secret Hawaii infiltration. Her dad saw us off at the airport like the proudest dad in a teen rebellion movie. I'd never seen him smile that wide. When we landed in Hawaii, Lena was practically glowing. We checked into our suite and made a game plan. That night, her family was supposed to dine at the hotel's signature restaurant. Lena? She wanted to make an entrance, but first, I scouted the place. I stayed near the shadows at the entrance to the restaurant and, sure enough, spotted Noah and his entire clan laughing it up like they didn't just abandon a disabled family member back home. Only Lena wasn't home. She was upstairs, curling her lashes and plotting emotional warfare. Then I saw something that made my blood run cold. There was another woman at the table. Young, glamorous, and how do I say this? Clearly not a cousin. And the conversation? Let's just say it wasn't subtle. Overheard, the ultimate betrayal Noah. I'm done with Mira. She's a mess. I'll divorce her soon, squeeze what I can in the settlement. His mum, even if you don't have a reason, will fabricate one. That woman was a mistake. Oh, and the other woman, she giggled. I didn't burst into tears. I didn't storm in. I just smiled. Then I quietly headed back upstairs, heart pounding, adrenaline racing. Lena looked up from the mirror, eyeliner wand in hand. That bad? Worse. He brought another woman. They're plotting to get rid of me. Lena paused. Time to change the script. So yeah, we walked straight into the restaurant, and I wasn't subtle about it. I locked eyes with Noah and said loud enough for every table within a 10-foot radius to hear, "Hope you're all enjoying your little family dinner." Time stopped. Noah's fork froze halfway to his mouth. His mum dropped her wine glass. The other woman? She looked like she wanted to slide under the table and disappear. But the real kicker? Lena stepped forward in full glam, no wheelchair in sight, and smiled. Surprised to see me walking? Talking. You could have heard a pin drop. The whole restaurant went dead silent. Noah blinked like he was seeing a ghost. His mum went from red to pale in 2.5 seconds. Lena. I thought you. Yeah, you thought a lot of things, Lena said calmly. But here I am. The confrontation, I stepped closer. My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady. Noah, you really brought another woman on vacation while leaving your disabled sister behind. You told me to take care of her like she was a burden, while you were out here celebrating your future divorce. He opened his mouth, but I didn't give him a chance. Oh, and don't worry. I recorded your whole little chat. Every word. Fabricating a reason? Squeezing me for money? Cute plan. His mum tried to backpedal immediately. Now, Mira, let's not overreact. Maybe we misunderstood. I understood perfectly, I said. You think I'm some failed investment, a bad lottery ticket. But guess what? That ticket just cashed out. I turned to the other woman who, by now, looked like she was either going to throw up or start crying. You didn't know he was married, did you? She shook her head. Well, now you do. Good luck with that. The aftermath begins. Noah stood up and actually had the nerve to reach for my hand. Mira, we can talk about this later. Please don't make a scene. Oh, honey, we're past that. You already made the scene. I'm just the plot twist. I turned to the waiter and said, Can we get the check for their table? It's on me. Consider it my parting gift. The restaurant manager came over, probably trying to figure out if he needed security. I looked him straight in the eye and said, No worries. We're leaving. Just thought they deserved to hear the truth before dessert. Lena and I turned and walked out, leaving behind a silence that was louder than any scream. The fallout back home. Once we got back to the mainland, I lawyered up fast. My friend from college worked at a firm, and though she wasn't available, her colleague was sharp and quick to understand the situation. I laid out everything, the cheating, the manipulation, the emotional abuse, the vacation affair. She smiled and said, Oh, we've got plenty to work with. And with that recording, even better. Turns out, Noah had been seeing the other woman for over 6 months. My lawyer went after him and her for alimony and emotional damages. Meanwhile, Lena moved out of her stepmom's house and got her own apartment, paid for by her dad. Apparently, he had no idea things had gotten that bad. He thought his daughter was being cared for, not silenced and neglected. We stayed close. She was the only good thing I got out of that entire family. The sweet taste of karma 2 months later, the divorce was finalized. The court granted me alimony, generous alimony, from both Noah and the woman he cheated with. Turns out she had a good job and had contributed to their little getaway. That was all the court needed. When the check hit my account, I stared at the number for a long time. Then I laughed, out loud, alone in my apartment. Guess I was a bad lottery ticket, just not in the way they thought. The final visit, about 3 months later, there was a knock on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I looked through the peephole and almost choked. Noah and his mum, both looking like they hadn't slept in weeks. He had bags under his eyes, like someone who hadn't seen a decent meal or paycheck in a while. She looked like she'd aged 10 years since Hawaii. I cracked the door open just enough to be polite. "What do you want?" He cleared his throat and said quietly, "Mira, I lost my job. She left me. I don't have anything left. Please, could you lend me some money?" Then his mum piped up, voice trembling. "My husband divorced me too. I have nowhere to go. Please, just a little help." For a second, I just stared at them. And then I smiled. That's rough. But you know what's crazy? I have absolutely zero obligation to help either of you. His mom burst into tears. "We're family." No, we were family. And you broke that. I shut the door in their faces, locked it. And just for good measure, I grabbed a handful of sea salt from my kitchen and sprinkled it across the entryway, like my grandma used to keep the bad spirits out. Epilogue. It's been 6 months since then. I've started rebuilding my life. Got a new apartment, a new job, and even started therapy, not because I was broken, but because I wanted to make sure I never let anyone clip my wings again. Lena and I still talk every week. Sometimes we joke about the Hawaii trip like it was some bizarre reality TV episode. Other times, we just sit in silence on the phone, comfortable and at peace. I still think about how Noah and his family tried to erase me, like I was just an inconvenience to be replaced. But the thing is, you can't erase someone who rewrites the ending. And mine? It's looking pretty damn good.